Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My mom was one of those people who never said no to anyone. She volunteered for everything at church, helped neighbors she barely knew, and somehow always ended up being the person everyone called when they needed something. That's how she met this woman about 6 years ago at some community event. This woman latched onto my mom right away. She called constantly, showed up without being invited, and invited herself to family gatherings. My mom was too polite to tell her to back off, even though the rest of us could see she was just using mom for free labor and emotional support. The woman never helped with anything in return. When mom needed help moving furniture or had car trouble, this woman was always mysteriously busy. But mom kept being nice to her because that's just who she was. She made excuses for the woman's behavior, saying maybe she was lonely or that everyone deserved kindness. Dad and I would roll our eyes, but we knew there was no changing mom's mind once she decided someone needed her help. About a year to this one-sided friendship, the woman called mom up with another request. She was redoing her kitchen and needed help with wallpapering. Mom had done our kitchen a few years back, and apparently word had gotten around about her skills. The woman begged and pleaded over the phone, saying she couldn't afford to hire professionals and really needed the help. So, of course, Mom agreed to spend her Saturday helping out. I offered to come along, but Mom said it would probably be boring and I should enjoy my weekend. I wished now that I had gone with her. Mom came home that evening looking frustrated and wearing this awful stained shirt that clearly wasn't hers. When I asked what happened, she explained that the wallpaper paste had somehow gotten all over her nice blouse during the project. She told me how clumsy she felt for making such a mess. The woman had given her this old shirt to wear home so she wouldn't ruin her car seats with the sticky residue. The shirt was obviously ancient, with small holes around the collar and faded beyond recognition. It looked like something that should have been thrown away years ago. But mom being mom, she washed it carefully and put it in her closet, planning to return it the next time she saw the woman. Except the woman never mentioned it again. Mom would see her at church events or around town, and they'd chat about other things. Mom eventually forgot about the shirt entirely. It just became part of her collection of old clothes she wore for gardening or cleaning around the house. Years passed. The woman continued calling Mom for various favors, and Mom continued helping despite our protests. She helped the woman move twice, painted her bathroom, dog sat her yappy little terrier multiple times, and even helped plan her daughter's baby shower. The woman never offered to help Mom with anything in return. Then last month, Mom had a sudden heart attack. She was only 58 and had no warning signs. One day, she was here making dinner and laughing at Dad's terrible jokes, and the next day, she was gone. It shattered our world completely. The funeral was small but meaningful. Mom's real friends came and shared beautiful stories about her kindness and generosity. Dad and I were trying to hold ourselves together and appreciate all the love people were showing for Mom's memory. That's when the woman showed up. She came over to where Dad and I were standing and started talking about how sad this all was. Then, like she was remembering good times, she brought up that wallpaper project from years ago. She started going on about what a fun day it had been, even with all the mess they made together. I forced a smile, thinking she was trying to share a nice memory about Mom during this difficult time. But then she suddenly said she had just remembered lending Mom a shirt that day when she got all messy. She explained that she never got it back and would really like to have it returned. She admitted she couldn't even remember what the shirt looked like anymore, but said it would have her initials written on the tag because she used some laundry service downtown that required that. I stared at her, not sure I was hearing this correctly. She then asked if I could maybe leave the funeral right now and go check for the shirt at home. She said she'd really like to get it back as soon as possible. I told her I was not leaving my mother's funeral to look for some old piece of clothing. When I questioned her about this request, she got defensive and said it had been 5 years already, asking if I didn't think that was long enough to wait. Dad noticed the conversation and came over to see what was happening. I explained that she wanted me to leave the funeral to go find some old shirt Mom had borrowed years ago. Dad asked the woman if she was serious about making this request at his wife's funeral. The woman insisted it had just been such a long time, and she really would like the shirt back. Dad told her that his wife had just died, we were at her funeral, and she was worried about a piece of clothing from 5 years ago. The woman tried to justify herself, but Dad cut her off. He told her she needed to leave right now and not come back. He said not to call either because we were completely done with her. The woman looked shocked that anyone was finally standing up to her manipulation tactics. She acted confused about why we were getting so upset about her simple request. Dad repeated that she needed to get out and stay away from us permanently. She huffed and gathered her purse as she walked away. Several other mourners had overheard the exchange and were shaking their heads in disgust at her behavior. The next morning, Dad went up to Mom's closet and found the shirt exactly where it had been hanging for 5 years. It was even more ratty than I remembered, with new holes and stains from being used as a work shirt over the years. Dad looked at the pathetic shirt for a long moment, then got in his car and drove to the woman's house. Instead of knocking on her door like a normal person would, he rolled down his window and threw the shirt right into her front yard as he drove past. When he got home, he was smiling for the first time since Mom died. He told me that she had gotten her precious shirt back just like she wanted. I asked if he had talked to her when he dropped it off. He said no, he had just returned her property exactly as she had requested. We never heard from her again after that incident. No angry phone calls, no showing up at our door, nothing at all. These days I'm in solid shape from consistent training and strict meal prep every Sunday. I wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym before work, and actually enjoy the process now. My buddy from high school is completely different. He's been medically obese since we graduated, spends 12 hours a day gaming, and orders takeout at least 4 times a week. But every 2 to 3 months, like clockwork, he goes through this exact same cycle. It always starts with a long text message at like 11 p.m. saying he's finally ready to change his life. He wants to lose weight, build muscle, eat clean, and be consistent with workouts. Then comes the part I've learned to dread. He asks me to help him get started. The first time this happened 3 years ago, I was genuinely excited. I spent an entire weekend researching beginner programs and writing up a detailed 4-week plan. I explained proper form for basic exercises like squats and bench press. I gave him a shopping list for simple meals he could prep ahead of time. I even offered to pick him up at 6 a.m. so we could work out together before my job started. He showed up exactly once. The next morning he texted saying his legs were too sore and he needed a few days to recover. Those few days became 2 weeks. When I asked if he wanted to try again, he said work was stressing him out and he needed to focus on that first. 2 weeks became a month. Then he started a new video game that required him to be online with his guild every evening. A month became 3 months. Then, out of nowhere, he complained to our other friends that I never took him to the gym anymore, like I was the one who stopped trying. This exact pattern has repeated 8 times over 3 years. Each cycle, I create a new program based on whatever excuse he gave for why the previous one didn't work. The first plan was too focused on upper body. The second had too much cardio. The third didn't have enough cardio. The fourth used exercises he didn't feel comfortable doing. I'd spend hours of my free time researching different approaches and writing detailed explanations. I made meal plans with exact calorie counts and macro breakdowns. I created grocery lists organized by store sections to make shopping easier. I even offered to meal prep with him on Sundays so he'd have everything ready for the week. But the worst part wasn't the wasted workout plans. It was the phone calls. He'd call me at random times, sometimes as late as midnight, wanting to talk about his weight problems. These conversations would go on for hours. He'd complain about how unfair genetics were and how his metabolism was permanently broken. He'd blame his childhood for giving him bad eating habits. He'd say his job was too stressful to focus on health. He'd mention some article he read about how dieting doesn't work long term anyway. I spent my time trying to motivate him and share stories about my own struggles when I started. I'd explain that everyone has challenges and that consistency matters more than perfection. I'd remind him that small changes add up over time. Nothing ever stuck. Last month, when he started the cycle again, I finally reached my breaking point. We were hanging out at our friend's apartment watching a movie when he brought it up. He said he'd been doing research online and was finally ready to commit to getting healthy. He asked if I could write him a new program because he wanted to start fresh. I asked him how many times we'd done this exact conversation. He got defensive and said this time was different because he'd been planning it for weeks. I pointed out that he'd said the exact same thing every single time before going to the gym once and disappearing. He said he just needed someone to hold him accountable and keep him motivated. That's when 3 years of frustration finally boiled over. I told him to stop asking me for help because he never followed through on any advice I gave him. I said he always ended up blaming external circumstances instead of taking responsibility for his own choices. His face turned red, but instead of responding to me, he turned to our friend who was trying to stay out of it. He asked our friend if he could start going to the gym with him since I apparently didn't want to help anymore. That was the final straw. 3 years of wasted time and energy, and now he was trying to make me look like the bad guy in front of our friend. I told him he had zero self-control and refused to take accountability for anything. I called him a hedonist who blamed every failure on other people instead of looking in the mirror. I said he'd rather complain about being overweight than actually do the work to change it. He protested that it wasn't fair and that I knew he struggled with motivation. I explained that struggling and making excuses were completely different things. I reminded him that I'd given him more help than most people would ever offer, and he'd wasted every bit of it. I told him that if he actually wanted to change, he needed to stop talking about it for the rest of his life and start doing it. Our friend sat there in uncomfortable silence while he complained about how mean I was being. But I wasn't finished. I told him what his real problem was. He didn't actually want to get in shape. He liked the idea of being fit and healthy, but he wasn't willing to put in any real effort. He wanted someone else to drag him through the process so that when he inevitably quit, he could blame them instead of himself. He insisted that he really did want to change and just needed support. I told him no, what he needed was an excuse for his next failure, and I was done providing that for him. I stood up to leave, but he kept arguing. He said fine, he'd prove me wrong and do it all by himself this time. I reminded him that he'd been saying that exact thing for 3 years. I told him to call me when he'd actually maintained a workout routine for more than 1 week straight. That conversation happened 2 months ago. I haven't heard from him since, which is honestly the longest stretch he's ever gone without starting this cycle over again. Our mutual friend told me last week that he never followed up about going to the gym together either. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh with him. But then I think about all the Sunday afternoons I spent writing workout plans that never got used. I remember all those late-night phone calls where he complained about his problems but rejected every solution I offered. I think about how he tried to make me look selfish in front of our friend after I bent over backwards to help him for years. You can't save people from themselves. I drive the same route to work every day for the past 5 years. It's a quiet stretch of highway that goes through rural areas before hitting the city. I work as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, so I spend a lot of time on the road. That morning started normal with coffee in my travel mug, radio playing classic rock, and my dash cam recording. I got the dash cam after a fender bender last year where the other driver tried to say I ran a red light. Insurance companies love video evidence. 20 minutes into my drive, I saw this beat-up sedan weaving through traffic. The 3 guys inside looked young, maybe early 20s, and they were clearly angry about something. The driver kept cutting people off and riding bumpers. I kept my distance because road rage incidents are something I want to avoid. Then I saw the silver Toyota Camry in the right lane, just a normal guy driving to work like everyone else. He stayed at a steady speed, in his lane, doing nothing wrong. But the 3 troublemakers didn't see it that way. The sedan swerved behind the Toyota and started tailgating. I could see the passenger hanging out the window waving his arms around. They pulled up next to the Toyota and started honking and yelling. The Toyota driver tried to ignore them at first, but these guys wouldn't stop. What happened next made me angry. The sedan cut right in front of the Toyota and hit their brakes hard, forcing the guy to swerve onto the shoulder to avoid crashing. Instead of driving away, the sedan pulled over too and all three guys jumped out. I pulled over about 50 yards behind them and grabbed my phone to call 911. I also kept my dash cam running because I knew this was going to get bad. These three were looking for trouble from the start. The Toyota driver got out of his car slowly. He was probably in his 30s, average height, wearing business clothes. He looked like he was trying to calm things down by talking quietly. I couldn't hear everything from where I sat, but his body language showed he wasn't being threatening. The first troublemaker started yelling at the Toyota driver, telling him he thought he owned the road. The Toyota driver tried to explain that he didn't want trouble and was just driving to work. The second troublemaker said the Toyota driver had cut them off earlier. The Toyota driver said no, he had stayed in his lane the whole time. The third troublemaker called him a liar and said they all saw what he did. The Toyota driver kept his hands where they could see them and kept trying to talk to them reasonably. But these three wanted a fight, not a conversation. They started walking around him in a circle, getting more aggressive. The first troublemaker said maybe they needed to teach him some manners about sharing the road. Then he threw a punch. The Toyota driver ducked it easily, which surprised all three of them. They probably expected him to run or beg. Instead, he stayed completely calm. The second troublemaker yelled for the others to get him, and all three rushed at once. What happened next looked like something from an action movie. The Toyota driver moved with perfect timing and skill. The first troublemaker threw another wild punch, and the driver caught his wrist, twisted it behind his back, and sent him face first into the gravel. The sound of his nose breaking was loud enough for me to hear. The second guy tried to grab him from behind, but the driver dropped low, swept his legs, and the troublemaker hit the ground hard on his back. Before he could get up, the driver had him in some kind of arm hold that made him scream. The third troublemaker ran to their car and pulled out a tire iron. Bad move. The driver saw it coming, let go of the second guy, and in one smooth motion took the tire iron away and used it against the third troublemaker. Not to seriously hurt him, but just enough to drop him and keep him down. The whole fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. Three guys who thought they were tough were now on the ground, two of them barely awake and one crying from what looked like a broken arm. The driver immediately pulled out his phone and called 911. That's when I realized this wasn't just some lucky guy who knew how to fight. His calm attitude, his fighting skills, the way he handled the weapon, this was someone with serious training. I walked over to help and offer my testimony. I asked if he was okay and told him I saw everything and had it recorded on my dash cam. He thanked me and said he was fine, that he had called for police and medical help. I told him I could give my footage to the police as evidence. He said he would appreciate that, then told me he was actually a special operations officer with the state police. He said these three had picked the wrong person to mess with. That explained everything. No wonder he handled them so easily. When the regular police arrived, one troublemaker was still unconscious from hitting the pavement. Another was holding his broken arm, and the third was sitting against their car looking like he'd been hit by a truck. The paramedics treated two of them right there before the officers put handcuffs on them and loaded them into patrol cars. The one with a broken arm and possible head injury had to be rushed to the hospital with police following. I gave my dashcam footage and statement to the investigating officers. The whole incident was captured perfectly, showing how these three started everything and attacked first. The special operations officer only acted in self-defense. Later that week, I read in the local paper that all three were charged with assault, road rage, and reckless endangerment. They had previous records for similar incidents. I moved overseas for work with my boyfriend. We found a nice place together, nothing fancy, just a regular 3-bedroom house that works perfectly for us since we both work from home. My sister back home knew about our setup and seemed happy that I was doing well in my new country. Last year around this time, my sister called me completely out of the blue. I was thrilled to hear from her since we didn't talk super regularly due to the time difference. She told me she had exciting news and that she was planning to visit me. I was absolutely amazed and asked her when she was thinking of coming. That's when she dropped the bomb that they were looking at coming for a couple of months. I felt my stomach drop a little. A couple of months seemed like a really long time for a visit. When I asked what the plan was, she said they figured they'd stay with me obviously and that it would be like old times. I told her of course they could stay here, but asked about the actual itinerary and what they wanted to see and do. She said they didn't really have a set plan and just wanted to hang out for a couple of months and see the country. The more she talked, the more my anxiety grew. My boyfriend and I both work demanding jobs from our home office. We have our routines, our space organized in a specific way, and our work setup dialed in perfectly. I asked her when she said a couple of months how long exactly we were talking about. She casually mentioned maybe 2 months, maybe three, and they'd see how it goes. Then I asked about work for them. She explained they'd work remotely from my place, and their company was fine with it as long as they kept their home country hours. Our home country is literally on the opposite side of the world. They would be working completely opposite hours from us, meaning they'd be up all night taking calls and working while we were trying to sleep. I asked if they'd basically be working night shifts then. She said yes, but told me not to worry about it, because they'd be quiet. I tried to picture this scenario. My boyfriend and I working during the day in our home offices, while my sister and her husband slept. Then at night, they'd be up working, taking video calls, and basically living their full work day while we tried to rest. For 2 to 3 months, I asked if they'd thought about where everyone would work during the day since we have our offices set up in two of the bedrooms. She said they figured they'd use the living room or something and that we could work in our bedroom if needed. So not only would they take over our common areas, but my boyfriend and I would have to cram into our bedroom to work. My boyfriend, who she'd never even met, would have to completely uproot his work setup and share our bedroom as an office. I told her I needed to talk this through with my boyfriend since it was his home too, and it would be a pretty big change to our living situation. She asked why I needed to ask him and said it was my family. I explained that we live together and this affects him too. Plus, they'd never met. She responded that he'd just have to deal with it. I felt my chest tighten. The entitlement in her voice was shocking. This was someone expecting to move into our home for months, completely disrupt our work and sleep schedules, take over our space, and not even consider that the other person living here might have thought about it. I spent the next few days thinking about it and talking with my boyfriend. He was actually more generous than I expected. He said that family was important, but 2 or 3 months of opposite schedules in our small place would be basically like having roommates we didn't choose. I agreed and said I wanted to see her, but this felt like too much. He suggested we compromise and offer them a shorter stay that actually works for everyone, so I came up with what I thought was a really reasonable alternative. I called my sister back and told her I'd thought about it and had an offer for her. She was absolutely welcome here for 3 weeks total. She asked if 3 weeks was it with obvious disappointment. I told her to hear me out and explain the plan. 2 weeks staying here with us, during which I'd plan road trips, take time off work, and cover all the expenses for activities and food. Then for the 3rd week, they could take our car and plan whatever trip they wanted around the country, and I'd help them book places to stay for that week. She asked if I was serious right now. I said I thought it was a great compromise because they'd get to visit, we get to spend quality time together, and they'd get to explore on their own too. She called it a compromise with disgust and said I was her sister. She asked how I dared put a time limit on family. I explained it wasn't about putting limits on family but about what was practical for our living situation. She said she couldn't believe I was choosing some guy over my own sister. I told her I wasn't choosing anyone over anyone and was trying to find something that works for everyone. She said 3 weeks was insulting and they were planning months of vacation time for this trip. I suggested they might plan to stay in different places and offered to help them find accommodations. She said they shouldn't have to pay for hotels when I had a house. I pointed out that we had a house that we live and work in, not a hotel. She said fine, don't bother, and they wouldn't come at all. I tried to reason with her and said not to be like this because 3 weeks was still a lot of time together. She said 3 weeks was nothing and to forget it, and she hung up on me. I thought she was just upset and would call back in a few days when she cooled down. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I tried calling her several times, but she wouldn't pick up. I sent texts that went unanswered. I even called our parents to see if they could help mediate. My mom said she felt like I had rejected her. I explained that I didn't reject her and had offered her 3 weeks and a free vacation. My mom said she wanted to spend real time with me. I asked if 3 weeks wasn't real time, but my parents seemed to think I should have just said yes to whatever she wanted. According to them, family comes first no matter what. The breaking point came about 6 months later when I found out through social media that they had taken their vacation anyway. They went to a different country entirely and stayed in nice hotels for 6 weeks. Apparently, they had the money for accommodations all along. When I saw those photos of them living it up in expensive resorts, I realized this was never about money or logistics. This was about her feeling entitled to dictate the terms of our relationship. She wanted me to prove my love by sacrificing my comfort, my boyfriend's comfort, and our home environment for months. Last month, I found out from a mutual family friend that my sister has been telling everyone that I chose my boyfriend over family and that I'm too good for them now that I live overseas. She's been playing the victim for an entire year, but here's what really gets me. The same sister who demanded months of free accommodation just bought a vacation home back in our home country. A vacation home. She had the money all along for her own accommodations, but felt entitled to ours instead. I've stopped trying to reach out. If she wants to cut me off because I wouldn't let her take over my life for months, that says everything about who she really is. I offered her a genuine, generous alternative, and she threw it back in my face because it wasn't exactly what she wanted. She wanted to move into our home for months, work opposite hours, disrupt our entire lives, and meet my boyfriend for the first time under these stressful circumstances. My boyfriend and I are doing great, by the way. My daughter is in 7th grade at the same district where I used to work, but at a different school. She knows my background, and I've told her to always be respectful to teachers and substitutes. Teaching is hard, and substitutes have it rough walking into classrooms they don't know. When she came home yesterday and told me what happened with their substitute teacher, I didn't believe her at first. My daughter isn't a troublemaker, but kids sometimes make stories sound bigger than they really are. Then she told me everything, and I realized this wasn't about kids being difficult. This was about an adult who shouldn't be in a classroom. The day started normal. Their regular English teacher was sick, and they had a substitute. My daughter said he looked grumpy from the start, but the class was behaving. They were doing a reading assignment when things went wrong. One girl was quietly tapping her foot while she read. It wasn't loud or bothering anyone. My daughter only noticed because she sits close by. The substitute suddenly hit his desk and told the girl to stop making noise and go to the office. The girl asked what she did wrong because she was confused. The substitute told her not to act stupid and that she knew what she did. He told her to get out of his classroom. The girl said she didn't understand because she was just reading like everyone else. Other kids looked up because the substitute was getting loud. Several students asked what was wrong. Different students said the girl hadn't done anything and was just sitting there reading. Instead of explaining what bothered him, the substitute got angrier. He pointed at the girl again and told her to go to the office, calling her defiant and disruptive. The girl asked him to please tell her what she did wrong. More students spoke up asking what the girl had done. They were confused because she had been sitting quietly doing her work. Instead of explaining that the foot tapping bothered him, the substitute picked up the phone and called the office. He told them he needed someone to get a student who was refusing to go to the office and causing problems. My daughter said the whole class stared at him. The girl wasn't refusing anything. She was just asking for an explanation. There was no problem until he created one. A few minutes later, the school counselor showed up. Before she could ask what happened, about 15 students started talking at once trying to explain. They told her the girl was just reading and tapping her foot quietly. They said she asked what she did wrong and he wouldn't tell her. They said she wasn't being disruptive at all. They said he just told her to go to the office for no reason. They said she had been sitting in the same spot the whole time just reading. The counselor tried to get them quiet so she could understand, but the substitute started yelling over the students. He said they were all lying, and that the girl had been disruptive and defiant. He said she refused to follow his instructions, but the counselor could see what was really happening. 30 kids don't make up the same story to protect someone unless something unfair happened. The counselor told everyone to step outside for about 10 minutes while she handled things. She said they could go to the library or hang out in the hallway quietly. When the class left, my daughter could hear the substitute still arguing with the counselor. He kept saying the girl had been disruptive and the whole class was lying. Here's where I'm proud of my kid and her classmates. Instead of just complaining about the unfair treatment, they made a plan. My daughter said that it was actually the girl's idea, which makes it better. They decided that if quiet foot tapping was disruptive enough to send someone to the office, then maybe the substitute needed to see what real disruption looked like. When they came back to class, the counselor was gone and the substitute looked smug, like he thought he won. The girl was back in her seat and class started again with another reading assignment. My daughter said they waited exactly 5 minutes to make sure he was settled and focused on his paperwork. Then, like some invisible signal went off, every single student in that classroom started tapping their feet, not stomping, not banging, just tapping like the girl had been doing. But instead of one quiet tap, it was 32 different tapping sounds at 32 different speeds. Some fast, some slow, some with pauses, some steady. It was random and chaotic. My daughter said the sound was incredible. Not loud enough to be heard outside the classroom, but definitely noticeable if you were sitting in it. Like rain hitting a roof with no pattern. The substitute's head shot up from his papers. He looked around the classroom and every single student was sitting properly, reading their assignments and tapping their feet. Their faces were innocent, like they had no idea anything unusual was happening. He sat there for a moment, probably trying to figure out if he was going crazy. The tapping continued. 32 feet, creating the most chaotic symphony of minor annoyance. Then something amazing happened. The substitute's face went through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. Confusion, anger, realization, embarrassment, and defeat. He slowly stood up from his desk, looked at the class of students who were all still reading and tapping, and quietly apologized to the entire class. Every foot stopped tapping instantly. Complete silence. 32 students looked up at him with expressions that were both innocent and knowing. My daughter said his face showed pure defeat. He knew exactly what had just happened. He knew the students had made their point better than any adult lecture could. He had been unfair and unreasonable, and they showed him exactly how ridiculous his behavior was. For the rest of class, he was polite and reasonable. When students had questions, he answered them properly. When someone needed help, he provided it without attitude. He learned his lesson. After school, my daughter told me the whole story. I was impressed. They hadn't been disrespectful or mean. They hadn't called him names or been openly defiant. They had simply shown him, in the most creative way possible, exactly why his reaction was unreasonable. I asked her if she thought they might get in trouble, and she just smiled. She pointed out that they couldn't really get written up for tapping their feet during reading time, especially when that's exactly what one student was punished for doing in the first place. She was right. How do you punish 32 students for doing exactly what one student was punished for doing, especially when that one student was punished unfairly? I called the school this morning to check if there had been any problems from yesterday. The principal told me that the substitute had called in to say he wouldn't be able to return to finish the week. He decided substitute teaching wasn't for him after all. The principal seemed curious about why I was asking, so I told him the whole story exactly as my daughter told it to me. There was a long pause before he responded. He said that explained a lot since they had 3 parents call yesterday asking why their kids came home talking about foot tapping and substitute teachers. He thought the kids were making it up. He told me that no students would be getting in trouble and that they'd be more careful about which substitutes they bring back. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.